guys, so you have a tight budget, a really tight budget, but you want to squeeze the most that you can get out of it. You want to start a 500 capacity chicken farm. That's the goal. That was always the dream. At some point you had to start with 500 chickens, but you have a really tight budget. Well, in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to actually do that, so stick around right through to the end. So first, we want to clear something. Having a tight budget and having a goal of, let's say, starting 500 chickens doesn't mean that you should always start with 500 chickens. You see, you might have the goal, but as long as you're not compromising quality and the performance, the end-time performance, then you can go along with squeezing your tight budget. But if milking the tightest budget means giving the birds less quality feeds, if it means at some point not giving the birds food because you don't know where to get food from, then it's something that I advise against. So I understand that you want to start with 500 birds, but make sure that you don't compromise quality simply to squeeze the best out of the money that you can. I would rather you start with 300 birds. I would rather you start with 200 birds, you know? I understand. I know you might be thinking, why 500? I honestly feel like 500 is a good enough number for you to consider it a proper business. Of course, people will have different kinds of businesses. People have different kinds of financial goals. Some people want to make $1 billion. Some people only want to be able to have their food ready for tomorrow. So while for some person 500 birds might look like an abuse, for another person it's a dream come true, and it's very understandable. But I feel like from my perspective and from a business perspective, 500 is a good enough number to consider it business that can bring in a bit of a sensible amount of money into your pocket. So that's why I'm going to consider 500. But like I said, you know, you can start with 100, you can start with 200. If for you it's going to take you 5-10 years to get to the point where you can afford to start 500, but at the moment you only have money to start with 200, I would rather you start with the 200. Start with the 200 right now than wait 5-10 years to do 500, because the dream might even die. It will totally disappear. You'll use the money for other things. You might never get to that point. So start wherever you want. So first, we're going to make a few assumptions. One of them is that you have nothing, completely nothing. You don't have a chicken house built. You don't have anything laid down. You know, you haven't brought any feeders, you haven't bought any equipment that you need, you haven't bought any chickens. The second thing you're going to assume is that you're open to looking after different kinds of birds. You know, it might be layers, broilers. Your mind is open. What you've made up your mind on is that it's going to be 500 chickens, but the exact type at this point doesn't matter too much. You're open to the idea of what will actually be best and most cost effective for you. And number three is that you're open to improvisation. Yeah, you need to be open to improvisation. That's the thing. If you don't have money, you improvise. If you're missing something and you're lacking something, and in this case the reason you're going to be lacking something is not because we can't access it, but because we don't have the money to afford what might be like the highest quality, then you need to make sure that you improvise. So you need to be open to those three things. Yeah, number one, you have nothing. Number two, you're open to any kind of birds, and number three, you're willing to improvise. So the first thing that you need to decide upon is what is the exact type of birds that you want to keep. There are four main categories. The first one is the local chickens. The local chickens are the birds that are usually indigenous to the area. The second one is broilers. Broilers are birds that are kept for meat. The goal and end purpose is typically for meat. These are birds that will grow really quickly. You know, 4, 5, 6 weeks, they're ready for sale, they're ready to be taken to the market, and you're ready to get your money out of it. The third option is the layers. Now, layers are chickens that are kept for egg production, solely egg production. That's the goal. You may be able to get other things, maybe feathers, maybe meat at the end, but the main purpose is egg production, and these are prolific birds at egg production. You know, you can keep them and they will give you 330, 340 eggs a year. And lastly, we have the dual purpose birds. The dual purpose birds are birds that can produce either eggs and meat. They're not so prolific at either. They can actually become quite big. You know, they might, at some point, they might even do 4 or 5 kilos. But they're not like broilers, you know, typical commercial broilers. The broilers will give you, you know, 2 kilos, 2.5 kilos at 6, 7, 8 weeks. The same type of birds, when it goes to dual-purpose birds, it will take you around 12 weeks to get to the same weight. Maybe twice the time that it will take you for broilers. So when it comes to egg production, the commercial layers will give you 330, 340 eggs. These ones will give you between 180 and 220 eggs. So again, they're not prolific at either, but they're also quite good. So if you're on a tight budget, let's see and weigh the options for the different kinds of birds. The first thing that you need to consider is that Local birds take a really long time to grow. They'll take a long time. If you're going to want a local bird, probably don't keep it for meat purposes. By the time it gets to, market weight, which is probably 1.8, 2 kilos, it will be over 6 months down the road. Yeah. If you want to get them to laying eggs, again, by the time they get to the point of laying eggs, it's also going to take about the same time, about 6 months. So they take a really long time. So it's not very commercially viable to actually feed local chickens on commercial feed because they have a very low feed conversion ratio. Feed conversion means for whatever amount of feed that we give the birds, what is the end product that we get out? For example, if you're considering it for broilers, feed conversion means for every gram or amount of feed that we give them, how much weight do we gain? If it's for layers, for every gram of feed that we give, how many eggs do we get out of it? When it comes to local chickens, it's so terrible. It's really poor. They take so long to grow. They'll eat a lot of food, but they take a really long time to put on the weight. So it's not commercially viable to feed them on commercial feed, and it makes more sense to feed them on, locally available food. And that means a lot of that is going to be free range. You let the birds free range, and then you can supplement their feed with either, maybe they eat grass, they scratch the ground for insects, and then you can give them maybe some maize bran, leftover food at home. It makes a lot of sense that way. So if you're thinking about it that way, there is already quite a number of disadvantages. The first thing is space. How much space are you going to need to free range 500 chickens? A lot of space. Ideally, when it comes to free range, we consider that 40 birds need about an acre. If you're going to be doing free range, 40 birds per acre, for them to live okay and not deplete the land and actually get all the nutrients they need, 40 birds an acre. So if you're talking about 500 birds, that's going to be what? Over 12 acres? Can you imagine? Think about it. So if you're thinking about cutting costs, then it doesn't make to do it the local way. Yeah. The second thing is the time. You don't have time. Yeah. Remember, the longer the birds take without giving you, you're losing money. You're feeding them, you're doing all these things, so you're not getting money back. But thirdly, the other thing we've talked about is food. You're going to need a lot of food to give to these chickens. And remember that you have a really, really tight budget. So honestly speaking, I don't feel like local chickens cuts it. If you want to do 500 birds on a tight budget, then local chickens will not cut it for you. If you want to do like 10, 15 birds, perfect. But 500 birds, not by any means. Number two is layers. So now when it comes to layers, they also have their cons. Yeah. So the first thing is that you're going to have to keep layers for up to 18 weeks without them giving you any money. They're not going to give you any money, so that's already a downside. The fact of time, it's going to take you a very long time before you get any money back while you're putting in money. That's already a downside for them. But number two, during these 18 weeks, you have to give them feed. And so think about it, you're giving them food for 18 weeks, that's quite an amount of food, before they give you a single egg. So if you're on a very tight budget, you want to, put in something, and after a short time, you're getting something back. Yeah, you don't want to delay. You don't want to wait 18 whole weeks before you can get any money back. So that doesn't make sense. But the third thing is that layers have a lot of vaccinations. They have way more vaccinations compared to, for example, broilers. Yeah, you're going to do a lot of vaccination. So you're going to do Merix, yeah, that's at the beginning. Luckily enough, that already comes in the cost of the birds, but also remember that layers are usually more expensive and costly than broilers, so you're already paying more starting off. But you're going to have Merix at the beginning, you're going to have Newcastle stroke IB, you're going to have Gumboro. Now, these ones you'll share with broilers, but after that, you're going to have fall pox, which is honestly not so cheap compared to the other vaccines. And then after that, you're going to have fall typhoid twice. Yeah, so it's quite an expensive vaccine, And then you're going to have all the deworming, the debeaking, and all the vaccinations that go in between there, more rounds of Newcastle. So in the end, the vaccination becomes quite expensive compared to, for example, doing broilers. So because of such a reason, I honestly don't think that layers would actually be a viable option for you. Number three, the broilers. Now, I feel like broilers tick almost every box. Almost, not every box, but almost every box when it comes to starting out, because number one, when it comes to spacing, there are the birds that you can compact in the smallest space. You understand? So broilers, for example, will be spaced in a space of about 12 to 13 birds per square meter. So if you want to do 500 birds, compared to, for example, doing layers where you can only do 6 birds per square meter, a chicken house that you're going to construct for layers that can only take 250 birds will take 500 broilers. So in terms of the space that you need, they're already a better option compared to layers. Secondly, they take a shorter time to give you money, a really short time. In 5 weeks, 4 weeks in some places, 5, 6 weeks, you're going to have produced everything that you need. The birds will have reached market weight. You can sell them on the market and get back the money you invested. And number 3, just due to the fact that they take a short time to get to that point, that means that you're going to feed them less compared to, for example, feeding the layers before you get back your money. And also, since they live for a short time, you're not going to give as many vaccines as you would be giving to layers. Yeah, you're going to give way less vaccine. So if it's about, having a tight budget, these ones tick literally every box. And then when it comes to the dual purpose birds, now these are a maybe. Yeah, these are a maybe. It depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking on the side of eggs, it's already out of the picture, because these are even going to feed more, and they are going to take probably a longer or about the same time as layers to get to the point of production, but they won't even give you less eggs. So in any case, it would even be better to do layers and not dual purpose birds if you're looking at the layer side. But if you're looking at the meat side, then maybe it makes sense. Now, the advantage with them compared to, for example, local chickens is that you can keep them in a chicken house, so you don't need to have them on free range. Give them commercial feed because they have a better feed conversion ratio, and so they'll put on more weight compared to, for example, local birds. Like I already told you, in about 12 weeks maybe they'll have reached over 2 kilos, 2.2 kilos, 2.5 kilos in 12 weeks. So if your goal is selling them for meat, then in 12 weeks you'll have gotten to that point. But remember, you also have an advantage where you don't only feed them on commercial feed, you can also supplement their feed with, other things, grasses, grains, leftover food. So for them, it makes a bit more sense. So we have 2 main options when it comes to what kind of birds you can choose. Number 1 is the broilers, and secondly, the dual purpose birds, while looking on the side of meat, i.e. looking on the broiler side and not the layer side. All right, so we are now done with the birds themselves. Next up is the structure. So you need to make sure that your structure is as cheap as possible. It shouldn't be like a house like this, yeah? It doesn't even need to be like my chicken house right here. You guys can see my chicken house right here. It's built and constructed from iron sheet. So it doesn't even need to be constructed from iron sheets like my chicken house right here. The main thing that you need to do is you meet all the protocols that are required. So that means the chicken house is properly aerated, and then there's enough space for the birds. So how are you going to do this? First, make sure you use poles, yeah? You use poles as the supporting thing of the house. Don't use bricks, don't use concrete. That's going to be very expensive. Secondly, on the sides, you can put wood offcuts. Wood offcuts are usually cheap. What are offcuts? Offcuts are, the things that are usually, when they cut a tree and they're making timber, there's the back, the part of the back that they first cut off. That's what we call offcut. So you can use that, place it on the chicken houses, and place it down, and at the top, all you need to do is put wire mesh. Put wire mesh, and you're ready. Make sure that the wall down is as low as possible, maybe 2-3 feet. That's enough. Put wire mesh at the top and put an iron roofing sheet, or you can use spare waste iron sheets that probably don't fit on a perfect house, but you can put them over there. Find a way of using them and putting them on the chicken house to minimize the cost of that house. The most important thing is that make sure that it meets the requirements of proper health of the birds. Yeah, make sure that the chicken house is aerated, properly aerated, and secondly, make sure it doesn't leak. Water does not enter the chicken house. The rest of the things you can improvise. The floor, the ideal would be concrete, but you don't need to use concrete. You can get marram. Remember, this is your very first floor. You're trying to save as much as possible. You can get marram and compact the marram. Use water and compact it properly. It will get really stuck together. It's very unlikely that broilers are going to go and try scratching it. Maybe after your second, third, fourth floor and you've gotten some money down, the first thing you'll work on is replacing that marram with a proper concrete floor. But at the beginning, not so necessary. You can honestly work without it. Next up is getting the birds themselves. Now, this is quite simple. You've decided that you're going to get, for example, broilers. This is why you can't make shortcuts. You can make shortcuts in other places. We've already made shortcuts on the chicken house itself. You can't make shortcuts on the quality of the birds, because when you make shortcuts on the quality of the birds, those birds are going to grow really slowly. You're going to spend a lot of money on feeding them, and they're going to take forever to gain their market weight. So it's something that I wouldn't advise you to do. 100%, don't do it. Get the best quality birds and don't do shortcuts. Not at all. Next up is the equipment that you're going to be using inside the chicken house. Now, this is another place where you can actually make quite a number of shortcuts, yeah? Because the equipment are just tools that you use to feed the birds, give them water and make sure that they get to the point of production while they're safe. So the first thing is, when it comes to brooding, you're going to need brooder paper. I use brooder paper. But if you're on a tight budget, you don't need brooder paper. All you need to do is go to someone who has a shop. They usually buy things and they'll have a lot of cardboard boxes they don't need. They're probably going to burn it. You're probably just going to help them dispose of it. Get some cardboard box. Sometimes you can use newspapers, all newspapers. Newspapers are not very advisable because they reflect a lot of light. They are, closer to white. So when light is shining down on them from the chicken house, the light might not be the very best for the chickens. But if it's the only alternative, I would rather you do it than put nothing. So you can use newspapers and you can use, cardboard. Place that down. Don't waste your time trying to get brooder paper. Just start with that. The other thing is going to be the heating. Really, I feel like the most energy efficient vis-a-vis cost thing to use for heating is actually charcoal. Yeah, of course, if you're going to compare it to things like gas or electricity, those things they're certainly more expensive. They are, of course, not the best environmentally friendly things, and a lot of people might comment in the comment section telling me how I'm against nature. But in all reality, they are the most cost effective. So you can use charcoal to heat up your house. The next step would be the drinkers. So there are different kinds of drinkers. In my chicken houses, use automated drinkers. For brooding, I use smaller drinkers, They're not automated, they are manual, but they are smaller. You can use those starting out. But if you want an even cheaper option, you can use homemade drinkers. These ones you can make from yourself, by yourself, using jerry cans from your home. I've actually made a video about these drinkers. I leave it in a link right here. You can check them out. These are homemade drinkers. Very beautiful, they function and work very nicely. You can check them out. It's a video that I made earlier on. Very cheap and effective. And the next step would be the feeders. This is another point that you need to be able to improvise and cut costs. Yeah, for me, I have feeders, they're a bit semi-automated. They're not really automated, but these others, you can use these wooden feeders. They're usually like rails, troughs. They're troughs like this, long, made from wood, and you can place your feed inside there. They would work very, very efficiently for you, and you'd certainly be able to save a lot of money. Also, you can use the round feeders like the ones I use from plastic, but made from a bit of metallic sheeting. I've seen those around on markets in my country, and they are always cheaper compared to the plastic ones that I do use. So this is another way that you can actually cut costs. Next up is the litter. So for litter, there are different types of litter. There's wood shavings, there's coffee husks, there's rice husks. In all this, I feel like, from my experience, wood shavings are actually the cheapest. I think rice husks are even cheaper depending on where you are and where you're located. Rice husks can be cheaper, but I feel like they're less effective. But if they're the cheapest option available, come on, go ahead and use them. I personally don't use them. I use wood shavings, but wood shavings in my area are even cheaper than coffee husks and rice husks. So use the least expensive in your area, whether coffee husks, rice husks, or wood shavings. Next up would be the vaccines. Now, this is another point where you can't do shortcuts. You can never do shortcuts with the vaccine. Don't even think about it. If you're trying and thinking about doing a shortcut with vaccines, don't. Because this is a potential point for disaster. It's just like the quality of the birds themselves, yeah? Quality of the birds, potential point of disaster. Quality of vaccines, potential point of disaster. You can't accept to skip some vaccines, yeah? Don't dare think about skipping some vaccines. Number two, don't even think about using poor quality vaccines, the cheapest vaccines you can find on the market. No. This, you need to make sure that you have a proper budget for it. Get the best vaccines you can get on the market. Give them to your birds so that you don't risk losing all your birds. You give the birds terrible vaccines. The vaccines have gotten spoiled, They're probably warmed up somewhere and now they're not effective. Before you know it, your birds are getting Newcastle disease, they're getting Gumboro, and they're dying. Terrible, terrible, terrible thing. So don't think about it. Make sure that you don't compromise on vaccine. And then the feeds. Of course, this is usually where the thing becomes the most expensive. Very, very expensive on the feed. Now, mixing feed and coming up with feed formulations is actually very complicated. I'm going to be sharing it on the Farm Up Academy. I feel like it's beyond the scope of the channel, honestly. It's quite complicated. It has so many details, a lot of details, more than what meets the eye. So that I'll be sharing in the Farm Up Academy. Yeah, I'll make sure that I share that in the Farm Up Academy. But what you need to do is that there's two options. Number one, you can either mix for yourself the feed, or number two, you can use concentrates. I don't advise you to buy already fully mixed feeds. Those will be 100% more expensive, yeah? But you can use concentrates. Those would certainly be cheaper because they have aspects of you being able to mix for yourself. For example, you have to add the maize yourself. Maybe, some of the other parts, maybe maize bran, you have to add that yourself. Sometimes you have to add soya cake, depending on the type of concentrate you're using. So that would make it cheaper for you. Or you can mix everything individually alone. That's if you understand how to. If you don't understand how to, then go for the side of using concentrates. Again, I want to be sharing with you guys how to actually mix the feeds. That will be on the Farm Up Academy, which should be open in April of this year, 2024. So when it comes to the feed also, the other place that you can use a huge advantage is making sure that you buy maize when the price is low. Buy when the price is low. For example, right now, the price of maize in my country has less than halved what it was, earlier on in the year. It's less than half of what it was. So this would be a very nice point for you to actually buy and store the feeds. Maize bran you can't store for a very long time, so I don't advise you to. But if you're doing broilers, you can actually store it because it's not a very long time you're going to need it. Maize also buy and store so that you don't have to pay very high prices. And then finally, the final takeaway point is that make sure that you have market before you start. Because when it comes to broilers, when it reaches market weight, target weight for selling, every other day that you keep them on the farm, you're losing money because you're feeding them. And usually the people who are going to come and buy them from you are not going to pay you extra money because you're keeping the birds for longer and they're putting on more weight. If you don't sell to them, they'll go to your competitor. They'll be like, we don't need the extra weight. They'll go to your competitor, someone else who can sell them to them at a cheaper price. You understand? So make sure that you've figured out the market. You can't compromise on the market if you're on a tight budget. You're going to be eating into your profits. Figure out the market way before you start, or if you start and you haven't figured out the market, as you're doing all these things, make sure that you're working on the market so that as soon as they reach, let's say 6 weeks, that was your target weight, 42 days, you're already selling them off and you're not making losses. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, smash the notification bell, and I'm going to leave a link right here to another video which you can watch. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys how much profit you can actually make from raising 500 broilers on a very tight budget. Yeah, how much profit can you make from it? Catch you very soon with another video. Bye-bye.